In the far left panel, Bosch portrays paradise. That is, Earth before the arrival of mankind. Paradise was a fantastic place. Bosch was right about that. Monkeys rode on elephants' backs. Dog-kangaroo hybrids and laughing mini-dragons danced around on their back feet. There was a little sea unicorn and a book-reading platypus. It was all quite marvelous. Yes, yes, God murmurs softly to himself. I remember paradise very well. Below, in the bottom half of this panel, Bosch paints Jesus talking to Adam and Eve, apparently instructing them to behave themselves. Now that's incorrect, God thinks to himself. When Adam and Eve instantly disobeyed, it was me they were disobeying, not Jesus. God stares at the painting for a moment, thoughtfully stroking his Fu Manchu beard. Unless, he thinks, unless it was Jesus who talked to Adam and Eve, in which case it was his fault that they instantly disobeyed, not mine. You know what? I think that is what happened. Make sure Adam and Eve behave themselves, I told Jesus, and he then flew down to the Garden of Eden, and he checked on Eve's pulse before giving Adam and Eve instructions, but they did not obey him because they clearly did not respect him. God peers more closely at the panel and shakes his head. I don't like the way Jesus is looking out at the viewer, as if to say this is obviously never going to work. That look bothers me. God moves on to the central panel of the Garden of Earthly Delights, and once again he nods to himself. Bosch got this part exactly right too, he thinks to himself. This is precisely what Earth was like before I flooded it. This panel, in fact, explains why God had flooded the earth and killed all of mankind. Look at the wickedness, God mutters to himself in disgust. Look at the licentiousness. Honestly, where to even begin? The naked man riding the lion bird. The other naked man, because basically they were all naked. Humans before the flood apparently never wore clothes, even though God had made it crystal clear to them from the very start that nakedness was shameful. They did it anyway. This man sort of tightrope walking on that curling branch extending out from the flesh-colored fortress, or how about that other naked man standing on his head, balanced on his squatting partner's head? Or how about below them, all those people scooting up the phallic play structure? His gaze dropping, God suddenly found himself feeling very angry. Why the hell are all those people gathered around that giant strawberry, he demands. I wanted them to worship me, not those giant strawberries which I caused to grow there. Also, how dare they parade around with those big fish, and how dare they ride that enormous duck? The way humans cavorted around in the garden, all right, yes, fine. It looked innocent in some ways, on some level. God had to admit that these people didn't seem licentious as much as they seemed brain damaged, but that wasn't really the point, was it? The point was their damn disobedience. Humans were disobedient, and they were proud. And that's what God hated about all the headstanding, for instance. It was proud. It was verging on show-offy. So you can stand on your head. Congratulations, I'll drown you for it, God remembers thinking to himself at the time. Someone had even trained a bear to stand on its head, which God thought was appalling. When animals stand on their heads, it makes me very upset. It makes me want to drown them all. Or how about this? Below the flesh-colored penis fortress, as God called it, a bunch of people were riding horses. One idiot was riding a bear. Good luck with that, shit for brains, God seethes. One of the riders seems to be trying to blow himself. He would definitely drown for that. In fairness, this man had zero chance of actually succeeding. Did that make his offense less bad? No, it certainly did not. It was the idea of blowing oneself that was evil. Any attempt, no matter how unsuccessful, was depraved. God tenses up, now gazing at the lower part of this panel. There is a definite sexual energy he feels in the way that duck is feeding that man a berry. To God's shit list of nudity, standing on one's head, and living in giant blueberries, he adds one more. No being fed in a sexually suggestive way by a duck. His gaze shifting again, God's lips curl downwards. Unbelievable, he hisses to himself. That man sticks flowers up his butt, and he's pleased with himself for it. He's smug about it. And that other man looks like he's about to stick more flowers up the first man's butt. I think he is. Anyone who thinks I'm okay with flowers up the butt, well, they don't know me very well. That's all I can say. And why would you want a flower up your butt anyway, God demands? What could possibly be pleasurable about that? These debauched libertines, they thought they could strip, live in giant strawberries, stand on their heads, and stick flowers up their butts with impunity. Honestly, what else was God supposed to do but slowly drown them all? God moves on to the right panel of the Garden of Earthly Delights, which shows the end of the story, hell. God appreciates this image in certain ways. Some of the punishment that is being meted out to sinners is appropriate. People are being knifed, burned, eaten, and these are all excellent punishments, God feels. But there are other punishments that make God shake his head in dismay. What exactly is so bad about being led around a turntable by a bird in a rather smart sweater? How awful could that be? All right, fine, maybe the bird's extremely boring. Maybe it'll never shut up. Maybe the man will have to walk around in eternal circles listening while the bird rattles on about its banal opinions or whatever. But still, it just didn't seem that excruciating. And as for those giant severed ears, fine, yes, those look quite painful. But the question is, why don't we see them actually being cut off? Given that the ears have already been severed, who exactly is being punished here? People who are terrified by the sight of giant severed ears? And no, it presumably would not be enjoyable to have your body become a sort of living treehouse for demons, the place where they gather to play cards and get drunk and gaze wistfully out at hell. None of that sounds like something you'd choose for yourself, but still, it doesn't look that terrible. The tree man looks vaguely put out when he should be in fucking agony for whatever it was he did. Stand on his head, probably, God mumbles to himself. It began to occur to God that perhaps the ones really being tormented in hell were the demons. That poor bird, for instance, forced to sit on its toilet throne with pots on its head and its feet, forced to eternally eat people and then poop them out fully formed, not digesting them at all, that is, getting zero nutritional value from them, just essentially having humans fall through its body. What a hellish existence that bird lives, God mutters to himself. Also, God grumbles, why would pooping out gold coins eternally be bad? It wouldn't be. Because if you pooped out gold coins, you would quickly become very, very rich. Hell just didn't make sense to God when you got right down to it. Some sinners are impaled or have their throats torn out, while others are merely forced to put off the advances of a pig in a nun's habit. I mean, fine, I get that the pig's advances would become tiresome, but why isn't the pig biting the man's head off, ripping his guts out? But then that raises another question. Would it even matter if it did? Look at that man near the Easter Bunny, for instance. And why is the Easter Bunny in hell anyway? God briefly wonders before quickly knowing the answer, because that's exactly where the Easter Bunny fucking belongs. That's why. This man is being stabbed, dry-humped, and throttled by a giant rat, and he looks completely unfazed. He should be shrieking in agony, pleading for mercy, and instead he looks like he's posing for a picture, like there's no pain at all. This is unacceptable. Or look at that man whose head is literally hanging off his neck. He looks thoughtful. He looks reflective. Why isn't he wailing in pain? His goddamned head is hanging off. What does it take to get a rise out of these sinners? Maybe when that pregnant lizard bird smashes the backgammon board down on him, then he'll react. But you know what? Probably not. Because if getting your head hacked off doesn't cause you to whimper, then I'm not really sure why having a board game smashed on top of your head's going to. Some sinners even seem to be sleeping through their punishment, which was utterly infuriating to God. Look at that woman being fondled by the miniature donkey and the tree alien, God thinks. They're both feeling her up, and she's asleep. I want her awake. I want her screaming, "Help me, God. I'm being molested by a small, insecure donkey and a tree alien. Help me. Please, please help me." But no, she just sleeps right through it. Unless she's dead, God thinks to himself, but then shakes his head quickly. How could you be dead in hell? There is some fairly good sexual humiliation going on in hell. God does have to admit that. God likes the naked woman being ridden around like a horse by the legless man in the hat. She's apparently about to have a meatball stuffed up her ass. Having things jammed up your ass was obviously one of the major punishments that awaited the wicked in hell. Even demons seem to have them. Look at that gray, hooded figure climbing into the giant man's innards, God muses. He could be a human sinner, yes, but doesn't the hood at least suggest a demon? But there's a bigger problem with punishing sinners with things up their butt, God now realizes. It just might not work. Think of that depraved man in the middle panel of the Garden of Earthly Delights. That man obviously wanted flowers up his butt. Would it be a torment for him to have a meatball up his ass? No. Some people liked things up their butts. That's the point. Would hell be a heaven to them? Oh, I'm nude on my hands and knees, being ridden around like a horse, getting a meatball shoved up my ass. I've never been happier. No!